The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anuj Desai, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. On today's show, I have Peter Vogel. Peter is founder and CEO of Leafwire. Leafwire is the world's largest cannabis and hemp business network and has been dubbed the LinkedIn of cannabis. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Anuj. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you on.
For a few weeks, so excited to finally make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to have you on. You know, lots been happening. Everyone's moving online. There's going to be loads to talk about. But maybe we start with the usual place. Tell us a bit about you and how you got into the world of cannabis.
Yeah, great. So I was in the kind of startup tech space for the last 20 years or so, and I've been a co-founder of a couple online marketing and advertising companies in the kind of loyalty space. And recently, about 3 years ago, the CEO of a company, Simplifia, a guy named Marion Marathason, who had been a buddy of mine for a long time, during a lunch told me that him and some buddies had this concept for this cannabis company that was going to be the LinkedIn of cannabis. And they were all running their own successful companies, and they needed someone to come do it. So I essentially quit everything I was doing in the tech space and jumped into cannabis head first.
Fantastic. That's good friends to have.
Yeah, for sure. So you gotta keep in touch with the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you sort of were working in the tech space before. Do you see any kind of parallels from the early days then to the early days of this sort of emerging industry?
I mean, for sure. You see we had, maybe still have, a little bit of a bubble that, tons of people were pouring money in, and you saw that with what happened to the stock market over the last 12 months, that, a lot of these, especially Canadian stocks, some American stocks got so hyped up, they spent so much money and were so spread out and so growing so fast. Once the money stopped for a couple months, any of those companies that weren't kind of already solidified and making money, those are the ones you start laying off, half their staff, closing stores, closing up, grow facilities, stocks plummeting 50, 75%. So that obviously all happened back in what I think is like 2010 or so. So we're kind of like a decade removed, I guess, but it was kind of the same phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you tell us a bit more about Leafwire and, how did it start and a bit about what it's about now?
Sure. So like you said, we kind of fashioned Leafwire to be a LinkedIn for the cannabis world. And, the reason we started it is we had, a lot of people talking to us, telling us the two main things. One, LinkedIn is so big. They have 660 million people. So that's twice the population of the entire United States. So there are so many people, so many industries being promoted. I mean, it's very hard to get a focused platform where you want people who are in cannabis are very focused. They're very passionate. They're very dedicated. They can really only work with other people who are either in the cannabis industry or service the cannabis industry. They don't necessarily want to be sold to by every insurance, lead gen, developer, recruiter in the world. They want to learn about cannabis events. They want to read cannabis news. They want to learn about cannabis legislation. They want to connect with other people in the cannabis industry. So when you have a platform that's that big, it's hard to get a focused amount of, what I just described. And the other thing I was told, this was true 3 years ago when I started, and even now, that there's a lot of stigma. Like even in the U.S., which is one of the more cannabis progressive countries, in about 70% of the states, it's still not even legal to recreationally consume cannabis. Like you can literally go to jail for having a joint in your pocket. So it's easy to forget. I'm in Colorado. Mostly we deal with, a lot of these other companies in California and Massachusetts and Oregon, Washington, all these places where it's legal, a lot of us kind of forget it's not necessarily normal in the rest of the world or the United States. So a lot of people don't feel comfortable putting the word cannabis or marijuana on LinkedIn. They don't want to necessarily be dubbed as like the cannabis guy or the cannabis gal. I mean, they don't know if if this is the last industry they're ever going to work in. What if they want to go back to a finance job, a Fortune, 500 company? Their uncle might be super religious and disown them because they're loudly talking about weed on LinkedIn. So a lot of people just didn't feel that was a safe place. So that's kind of what we made at Leafwire is people can literally talk about any aspect of cannabis, and it gets so detailed and specific. An example I like to use is someone posted an article about a jockey who had gotten kicked out or not kicked out, suspended for giving his horse CBD. And after someone posted that, there ensued literally, I think about 40 posts of all of our members debating the proper dosage of CBD to give a horse. And that's such a weird, detailed thing. Like you wouldn't see something like that on LinkedIn. So this is a very passionate audience that cares about this plant, what it can do, the good it can do for the world, for people, etc. So it's just a safe place for people to do that. And it's just essentially grown from there. So the goal is to give more and more resources to the entire cannabis business world and figure out how we can support them.
Yeah, that's brilliant. As you were talking, it kind of dawned on me a bit. How do you kind of deal with, or have you noticed the kind of cultural aspects of cannabis interacting with your platform? Because if it's, say, a predominantly business-focused cannabis industry platform, do the lines blur a bit between the sort of cultural aspects of it as well?
Yeah, I mean, so we try very hard to be what we describe as the LinkedIn of cannabis versus like the Facebook of cannabis. So there are other places that are things, like Weed Maps or High Times or, Leafly, things like that are more consumer oriented. Mm-hmm. So one, we go out of our way to do all of our marketing on business cannabis type platforms. So we work with Marijuana Business Daily, Cannabis Business Times, Cannabis Business Executive, Ganjapreneur, things that are Weed Week is another one. So we go out of our way to do customer acquisition and marketing efforts in places that are focused on business. So that's first how we kind of try to build that audience of business people. And, a lot of things around, like we don't have places on the website where we just like post pictures of product, or we don't just, have people review products, or we try to go out of our way not to do things that are more consumer oriented. But, it's a combination. I mean, most people if you work in the business of cannabis, for most people, it's a somewhat of a passion project that they joined because cannabis made a difference in their life. It could have been for them, for a loved one, they were a caregiver, a child. So a lot of people in the industry, I would say probably most, are also, consumers of cannabis. So just because it's a business website doesn't mean the majority of people on the platform still use cannabis and they do talk about it. The most discussion though if you look down the news feed, people post, whatever, 50, 100 things a day, articles, whatnot. Mostly it's about businesses, events, webinars, announcements, things like that. It's pretty business focused, and it's kind of just stayed that way since we started.
Yeah. As you say, there's other outlets for people to indulge those other aspects, I suppose. So keeps you guys very focused on what you can deliver, which kind of leads me nicely on. What is your sort of revenue model, and how has that evolved from day one to where you are now? How many members have you got, etc.?
Sure. We're now up to about 35,000 members, all
Wow.
Cannabis professionals. The people that are our members are everyone from the growers to the bud tenders to CBD companies to packaging companies to lawyers and investors. So it's a huge swath of anyone in the industry that's in the business of cannabis. So whether you grow it, sell it, market, ship, secure it, make money from it, etc., all of those types of people are on the platform. And those 35,000 people make up about 15,000 companies. So just like LinkedIn, you join, you create your profile, and then you can also add your company profile, or you can list your professional experience. So there's about 15,000 companies that have profiles. And one thing we did find, which was interesting, so we wanted to get a little more info about our member base. So we pulled all of their titles, like that they listed, and pulled them in a spreadsheet and kind of tabulated it. And the number one most common titles were things like co-founder, founder, president, CEO, VP, director. Those are, I think, the top 8 titles, which makes sense if you think about it. I mean, people come onto Leafwire to network, to find business partners, to hire someone, to find investors. So these are all decision makers for their companies that are looking to do more, to find something, to ask questions, to network, etc. So what I did not answer, though, is our business model. So our Leafwire is what they call in Silicon Valley, a very common term is a freemium model. So everyone can join for free, and then there's premium features they can pay for. So what we've started out with so far is you join free. We have advertising in our emails, on our website. We have a marketplace, which is kind of like a Yellow Pages type directory, which is like a cannabis friendly list of PR companies, tech companies, tracking, shipping, real estate, anything you can think of. So companies pay for a monthly listing there. We also just launched a job board a couple months ago. So we have about 1,500 cannabis and hemp jobs on the platform, and companies pay a fee to list their jobs. We will be launching soon. Well, I guess two things. One, we're launching a partnership with a company called Green Flower Media, which, if you don't know, they're one of the more probably most well-respected education providers in cannabis. Their courses have been adopted by 5 or 6 universities in the United States, including like UC San Diego and some other big ones. But we're launching a education section on Leafwire, and our members get 10% off any classes they take. Well, they'll also get a little kind of seal or certificate on their profile that shows that they've been certified and tested in various different areas of cannabis. So we'll be launching that soon. And then the end of the year, we're going to be doing just kind of like a LinkedIn type premium subscription. So we'll have some advanced features that you can pay a monthly fee to get. So we're mirroring a lot of the same revenue streams that LinkedIn grew with.
Sure. Yeah, that's great that you're kind of looking at all those different things. And yeah, we've had Max on the show before as well from Green Flower. So
yeah, Max is great.
Yeah, brilliant.
Very, very visionary, very innovative.
Yes, absolutely. And in terms of what you do, is your user base predominantly US or North American, or what's your international footprint like?
We are truly international, and we do want to keep growing an international base. We're about 90% US, 5% Canadian, and 5% the rest of the world. The third biggest, 1% is the UK. About close to 1%, I think is I think it's Australia that's next. South Africa, Germany, Brazil. So we literally do have people from all over the world.
Right. Brilliant. And what's the impact of COVID been on you? Because obviously you're digital. So have you noticed a sort of spike in traffic, or have your plans changed at all because of the pandemic?
Yeah, there's been a couple positive effects, some negative. One kind of neutral effect. We use Google Analytics, and we always look at how people are accessing. We used to be almost 50-50 of like people accessing Leafwire via mobile and desktop, and it's now gone to 80-20 desktop. And it makes sense. People are at home, right? So they're not necessarily needing to use their phone as much. So it's kind of a weird just thing that happened, but that's one thing we noticed. One thing that's been tough is we were fundraising, trying to finish a round, and I closed about half of the round up until February 1st, and then it basically froze for like 5 months. And we actually recently got in, our first new investor over the last couple of months. We got in a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to be announcing we're going to be doing a crowdfunding campaign as well. So we're just closing a deal right now with the platform here in the US that we're going to be launching a crowdfunding campaign probably in a couple of weeks.
Fantastic. Well, you got the right product for a crowdfunding type investment raise, I think. So best of luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, we think so too. The people. So one thing that's interesting about this, I've talked to in the process. There's probably 5 or 6 different crowdfunding companies. They've all told me they're having like some of their best months ever over the last couple of months. They're all booming, and I think it's because so many people are at home sitting around thinking like, "Hey, what can I do to make a little more money? How can I?" The stock market's kind of nuts right now. Like, there's almost nowhere to go for the stock market but down. So if you take a little money out, put it in a couple other investments, you're just spreading your investments around. So I don't know if that's it. I know. I'm sure you've read about that app Robinhood. That's like all the millennials are pouring money into and day trading like crazy now. So maybe it's just time. People at home. Also, I think maybe people are spending less money out at restaurants and bars and vacations. So maybe they actually feel like they have more money.
Yeah, it's probably a whole mix of those things, isn't it? People thinking a little bit longer term, maybe not the day trading thing, but but yeah, it's certainly in a crowdfunding platform. You're a kind of early stage investor, aren't you? Really?
Yeah, totally. It's
Yeah.
it's a unique way. It's hard for a lot of those individuals, and I don't know what the laws are, over there, but in the U.S., you have to be an accredited investor to invest in smaller private companies, which I've always thought was kind of unfair to people who don't make X amount of money or have $1 million in the bank. They're locked out of investing in private companies under the auspices of protecting them. But they can go invest online in any company in the world, basically, lose all their money. They can go gamble all over the country, lose all their money, but they're not allowed to just invest in startups. So that's one thing. Crowdfunding kind of alleviated that and allows the common person to just, if they want to put in $500 to a company, great, take a shot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could talk about that a lot longer, but let's talk a bit more about the platform. And well, I mean, look, on a macro level, you've got this brilliant social network. What are the sort of trending things that you're seeing on the platform at the moment, from topics or themes that you're seeing?
Well, one, webinars have gone nuts. Everyone and their mother is hosting webinars right now. Like, literally, it's like the one thing every company thinks, oh, this is my chance to, do some marketing and engage my audience. So, I mean, there's probably a dozen people a day announcing webinars on the platform, different for law firms, for accounting firms, for marketing companies. I mean, everyone. That's like all over the place right now. CBD has still been kind of booming. I mean, I still see tons of new CBD products are being promoted constantly. Don't know if that's related to COVID at all. I mean, I've seen touted people talk about CBD or cannabis as potentially alleviating some of the symptoms of COVID. I don't know that there's much science behind that yet, but we've definitely seen a ton of that. Other than that, for cannabis, I think it's a lot about the alternate mechanisms now. So they talk about like curbside pickup is big in the US right now. Delivery, a lot of places that didn't allow delivery, all of a sudden are allowing delivery because they realize, why are you forcing people to walk into a store, which typically doesn't have windows or air because it's supposed to be secure. So it's not, I don't even know if you can have open windows in a dispensary. So a lot of the things about the industry like that have changed or are more liberal, I guess. They've loosened up some of the restrictions. Most of the numbers, though, we see, I mean, people keep reporting some of the months people are having are like the biggest months ever. So cannabis dispensaries, cannabis products, a lot of those companies are doing great. You still see some public companies that are struggling. They grew too fast, and fundraising is still really tough. I'm sure you read about, there are a couple of big cannabis tech companies over the last 2 weeks, Dutchy, Philo, and Spring Big, that all raised $10 to $20 million each. So there are literally 3 cannabis tech companies that brought in, $50 million in total or something. But those are all companies that are established, have a huge customer base, and already they're most of them are in like their Series B raise. So it's different for a lot of the people, and we hear from people all the time that are fundraising. People that are in their seed stage or Series A that are trying to raise $500,000, $1 million, $2 million. It's really hard right now to raise money for companies that are not already established, because I think people still have a lot of a fear-based. They kind of don't want to take they want to invest, they have money. They don't want to put money into something until it's already shown it has legs, it has customers, and it's profitable. So that's why those companies that I just described are all already big and established and have a ton of customers. And that's the people who are getting money right now.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Some harsh lessons learned from the Canadian markets and generally people throwing money at the companies that haven't
Right.
even got any revenue yet. Cool. That's great to get that sort of overview of what you see. What are the major challenges you're seeing in the industry as well?
The number one I would almost just say is cash flow in terms of fundraising. I mean, that's hard for everyone right now. So a lot of the big conference companies, people like Marijuana Business Daily, they've laid off probably half their staff. They missed their Vegas event, their New Orleans event, which is their second biggest of the year, the MJ Biz Next. Vegas is scheduled for December, but last year they had 35,000 people. Even if December happens, it's hard for me to believe you're going to get more than like a couple thousand people who want to congregate. Even if there's a vaccine, only portions of people have taken it. Only portions of people are willing to. I mean, so going to an event like that, it's hard for me. It's hard for me personally to imagine going to an event with thousands of people for a long time. I mean, my wife and I, mostly we hang out with friends in backyards, ours or theirs, and, in groups of like 4 or 6. We've had plenty of friends that have had events with 50 people, 75 people that we don't even go to that. So it's hard to imagine going to an event with thousands of people. So all of those conference companies are hurting right now. I mean, they're all trying to do online things, but the revenue is not the same. And the size isn't the same. Like an online event that's successful, gets like 300 or 400 people versus MJ BizCon Next was normally 6,000 to 8,000, I think, something like that. In the New Orleans one, they probably had like, 4, 5, 600. So it's literally 10% of the amount of people. I'd say one other challenge, because I think cash is tight and some people are letting people go, just continuing the normal business. So like selling advertising to companies, selling products. I think it's hard to keep up to the same levels you may have been used to before because there's just a lot of people who don't have money to spend or people are conserving cash. We don't know when this is ending or changing. So there's still a lot of conservatism, I think, in terms of like spending money. So I think that's hard on everyone. When cash is not just flowing freely around the industry right now.
Yeah, major constraint for a lot of people, and not dissimilar to what's happening on this side of the pond either. Cool, thank you for that sort of summary. That's really useful. So as we get towards the end, maybe we sort of flip back a bit to the broader social network side of what you guys do. I mean, how do you view LinkedIn? For me, it's a very positive platform around cannabis, chiefly because it's relatively open to it, but obviously it's not specialized like what you guys are doing. How do you sort of see LinkedIn fitting in with what you guys are doing?
Part of the reason I was excited to do this is so I love LinkedIn. I have 24,000 connections on LinkedIn. I've been a member since 2007. I go on every day. I post things. I send messages to people. I look people up all the time. And I go on Leafwire every day. So I go on Leafwire to post cannabis news, to read everything else people are posting, to connect with people, et cetera. So to me, I view it as a valuable resource that anytime people ask me, I tell them they should be using LinkedIn. And we do marketing campaigns on LinkedIn, finding people who are into cannabis and bring them over to Leafwire. And we've had very extremely positive results when I send messages out to people on LinkedIn and I tell them about Leafwire. Almost invariably, the number one response is, "Wow, that's really cool. I didn't know about that. I'll come check it out right away." So, it's not we don't consider it an us or them. It's kind of like I use Facebook. I have a bunch of friends and family on Facebook. I go on there to look at pictures of food and vacations and people's kids. I go on LinkedIn every day for work. I look up people. I look up their jobs, who they know, where they worked. And then I go on Leafwire for more cannabis-focused news and events. And if I want to promote, a webinar, if I want to, promote a cannabis job, if I want to, ask a question, does anyone know XYZ? I'll go do that in Leafwire. So it's kind of, you use each of the different platforms for kind of what they're good for.
Yeah, it is a good way of kind of sort of simplifying the interaction, I think. I mean, one of the things that I think, I also am a big fan of LinkedIn, use it every day, but I guess because it's so vast, there are thousands of different sectors that are represented there. And I guess that's one of the advantages of Leafwire. What's your attitude towards education, for example? Because one thing that is very clear is that everyone in the cannabis industry needs to learn more about it, I think. So how do you feel you can sort of play a role in that?
Well, that's 100% the reason. I mentioned Green Flower Media earlier. I mean, they are, the leader in cannabis education. They have a staff of, I think, 30 or 40 people. They have a studio where they produce like thousands of hours of cannabis educational content. So we're, it's actually, the timing of this is funny because literally I think like it's either tomorrow or Monday, Tuesday that we're going to be launching a little tab on Leafwire it's called Learning or Education. And on that, we're going to have all of the courses from Green Flower Media. And anyone who clicks through and uses a code, every Leafwire user gets 10% off everything they buy from Green Flower Media. The reason we did that is because we constantly had people coming to us saying, hey, I'm interested in getting a job in cannabis. I'm interested in getting into the industry. Like, how do I prepare? Is there a certification? What can I do? And, for a while, we kind of didn't know what to tell people. Like, there's lots of people out there. And we finally realized, okay, we need to go out there and find the best partner. We need to be able to recommend someone. And since jobs are a huge part of what we're doing right now, the employers, they want people that have gone the extra mile, that have said, even though I used to work in food and bev, I'm going to come into cannabis, and to show that I'm really into it, I'm going to take 3 Green Flower Media courses, pass the certification testing, and show that like I really am committed and understand the industry. And that's why we're partnering with Green Flower Media to put up a little certification or seal on all of our members that take those classes. Will get a little kind of extra bonus so that employers can see those people went the extra mile. They're committed. They really want the job. And so if you're an employer looking at 2 people and one of them took 3 classes and the other one just says they really are into cannabis, but that's all. I mean, who are you going to pick? You're probably going to pick the person that showed they went the extra mile. It's like the extra research, the extra homework you do to prove that like you care about something.
Yeah, and this is a really smart idea, that kind of level of accreditation that gives people, it's trust really, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay,
100%.
You guys have gone through that process. These are well-respected courses, so I know that you know what you're talking about, or I hope you know what you're talking about. Cool. Well, great. Well, Peter, thank you so much. That's been really, really interesting. I'm a big fan of what you're doing as well. I think it's great. So we'll provide links to everything when I put the show out. Be great to, be great if we can do this again 6 or 9 months down the track.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I'd love to come visit you there in London and hang out one of these days.
Oh, absolutely. I look forward to that as well. Cool. Okay. Well, cheers, Peter. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining me for that. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you did enjoy it, please hit subscribe on whichever podcast platform you use. I'd also love a nice 5-star review on iTunes if you have the time. You can also follow the Cannabis Conversation page on LinkedIn and also sign up to my mailing list via cannabis-conversation.com. Until next week, have a good one.